America and other free and open societies face crucial challenges and opportunities abroad that affect security and prosperity at home. This is a series of conversations with guests who bring deep understanding of today's battlegrounds and creative ideas about how to compete, overcome challenges, capitalize on opportunities, and secure a better future. I am H.R. McMaster. This is Battlegrounds.
In today's episode of Battlegrounds, our focus is on the island nation of Japan, a close U.S. ally and key partner in economic development and security in East Asia. Our guest is Minister Kono Taro. A graduate of Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, Minister Kono has served 8 terms in the Japanese House of Representatives. He has held a range of ministerial positions, from chairman of the National Public Safety Commission to foreign minister and defense minister. He has seen the transition between 11 governments as an elected official. Last month, new Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide tapped Kono to oversee administrative reform and digital transformation as the Minister for Administrative, Regulatory, and Civil Service Reform. The Japanese nation reflects a civilization with prehistoric roots. In the late 3rd century, the tribes that occupied the Japanese archipelago loosely unified to form the imperial dynasty that reigns over Japan to this day. By the late 12th century, shoguns, political military leaders of noble caste, assumed de facto power over the country. Centuries that followed were filled with civil wars between warlords, or daimyos, until the Tokugawa shogunate consolidated power in 1600. The Tokugawa shogunate maintained control until the Meiji Restoration of 1868 restored practical imperial rule to Japan and ended Japan's 2.5-century isolation from the world. The return of imperial rule saw the end of trade isolation with the arrival of the Western black ships and a period of modernization. Imperial Japan fought wars against the late Qin dynasty and Russia, annexed the Korean peninsula and Taiwan, and invaded Manchuria in 1931 in what was a precursor to the global conflict of World War II. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese military bombed Pearl Harbor, assuming that the United States would not make the sacrifices necessary to penetrate the inner island chain and threaten Japan directly. That resulting miscalculation resulted in the Pacific War, a war that was extremely costly to America, its allies, and the Japanese. A war that ended with the United States dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. The day after the war ended, the United States extended and Japan accepted a hand of friendship. Japan grew into a thriving democracy. It adopted its current constitution in 1947 and experienced such rapid economic recovery that it was deemed the Japanese miracle. The U.S.-Japan alliance also flourished into a miracle of history, in the words of former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. Today, the United States' largest overseas military presence is in Japan, and Japan is the United States' 4th largest trade partner. We talked to Minister Kono at a time of increasing aggressive actions by the Chinese Communist Party, a growing threat of a potential nuclear-armed North Korea, and the emergence of new arenas of competition in space, cyberspace, and disruptive dual-use technologies. A strong U.S.-Japan alliance based on our common commitment to preserve peace, promote prosperity, and advance democratic principles in the face of those threats is more important than ever.
Kono-san, konnichiwa. Welcome
Hi.
to Battlegrounds.
Thank you.
Hey, it's great to see you. Hey, let me begin by saying what an honor it was to serve alongside you, as well as our friend, former Japan National Security Advisor Yachi Shitaro, and of course Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, an extraordinary leader who's just resigned after the longest tenure in Japanese history as Prime Minister. Thank you for taking time to join us during what I know is a very busy time for you and all Japanese leaders. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be on this program, and it has been so nice working with you as a defense minister. So thank you very much.
Kono-san, thank you. And your Prime Minister Abe once described our alliance as a miracle. What struck me in my time as National Security Advisor was how closely aligned we were on critical challenges, from the increasing aggression of the Chinese Communist Party to the growing threat from North Korea. I often thought, however, that we cannot take our close relationship for granted. So Mr. Kono, you've served in government since 1996, and you've witnessed many transitions in governments on both sides of the Pacific. And I wonder if you might share your observations about how the Japan-U.S. relationship has evolved and your assessment of the alliance today from your unique perspectives as Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Defense, and now Minister for Administrative Reform and Regulatory Reform.
Thank you. Well, since I came to the Parliament for the first time in '96, I think Japan-U.S. alliance went through some changes. During the Democratic Party of Japan government, I think alliance went a little rocky. But since Prime Minister Abe came back second time, I think he has taken strong leadership to make the alliance stronger than ever. I could say the alliance is really stronger than ever, and we can now talk to each other very frankly, and whatever we say, the alliance still remains strong. So at the leaders level, foreign ministers level, or defense ministers level, we can say whatever we need to say to our friends, and we can still make the alliance strong. And I think it is very important as we try to make free and open Indo-Pacific vision, realize things. So I'm very happy that I have been able to serve as a foreign minister and defense minister at the height of this alliance, and we will make alliance stronger to the future.
Kono-san, since we were last together in Tokyo at the end of 2019, our two nations and the world have been through quite a bit in 2020. Mm-hmm. It's been a tough year, and that we'll surely remember as infamous. Prime Minister Suga-san has said that he plans to carry forward Minister Abe's policy. So in your view, what does the election of Suga-san to the prime ministership mean for the future of our relationship? And as you look at the U.S. Presidential election that's ongoing now, what advice would you give whoever's sworn in to the U.S. presidency on January 20th of next year?
Well, Prime Minister Abe was longest serving prime minister in our history. But Suga-san was also the longest serving chief cabinet secretary, sitting in the prime minister's office for nearly 8 years in that capacity. And he has been working with Prime Minister Abe hand in hand. When I was a foreign minister, when I was a defense minister, I did my briefing to Prime Minister and did my briefing to the Chief Cabinet Secretary. So Suga-san is very well aware of the development in security field and foreign affair field. So he knows what Prime Minister Abe was trying to do, and he knows everything about conversation between Prime Minister Abe and the President Trump. So he will continue this momentum. The only thing that the Prime Minister Abe did and the Suga-san may not be able to do, I'm not sure if Suga-san is a golfer or not. So he may not be able to play golf with President Trump as Prime Minister Abe did. But other than that, I think he will continue to carry the torch forward. So whoever going to sit in the White House next year, he doesn't have to worry about his ally in East Asia. We will continue to be the most important ally in Asia to the United States. And this alliance between Japan and the U.S. will continue to be public good to keep the stability and peace of Asia.
Well, Kono-san, and I think all of us look forward to the end of 2020 and a new year. I know you're looking forward to the Olympics in Japan as well. So we hope that we've kind of hit bottom here, so to speak, and for both of our countries and the world, and it will have a wonderful year next year together. I think one of the most important aspects of Prime Minister Abe's leadership, and I think what seems is going to be a very strong element of continuity in the U.S.-Japan relationship, is Prime Minister Abe's vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. And could you describe that to our viewers? What is that vision? And maybe share your assessment of what we've accomplished so far in realizing that vision, and what more that we need to do. I know there was just the ministerial meeting, for example, in Tokyo of the Quad, which is the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India. And it seems as if there is momentum building behind this idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Well, we used to talk about Pacific, the Pacific regions. But Prime Minister Abe was expanding this vision, including ASEAN countries, India, and to Middle East, to the eastern coast of Africa. So he was proposing the vision of free and open Indo-Pacific, meaning free and open maritime order, peace and stability in this Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. In order to make Indo-Pacific region free and open, we were trying to achieve maritime safety in the region. We need to work on capacity building with so many countries in the region, provide humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, counter-terrorism capability, and all those things. We have been working very closely with US, Japan, Australia, Canada, and other like-minded countries to do the capacity building to many countries in Asia and Africa. And also we are trying to promote so-called quality infrastructure. Sometimes you borrow money and you end up not being able to pay back. And some country lost a very important infrastructure to some other country. Some other country lend the money and control the infrastructure later on. So we are trying to avoid that's happening in the region. So we have been working very closely with many countries in this region, and Quad, US, Japan, Australia, and India are now the leader of the four countries are meeting, and the foreign minister just met in Tokyo. So we are trying to institutionalize this Quad meeting to keep the free and open Indo-Pacific. And this vision is open to anybody, any country. Any country can be welcome to join us to promote this region. I mean, in Indo-Pacific, more than half of the population on this planet are living in this region. And this is going to be the center of the economic growth into at least first half of the 21st century. So it is very important to keep the region free and open.
Well, Kono-san, I think it's tough to argue with that, right? But we are up against I think a rival, especially in the form of the Chinese Communist Party, and its policies. So a free and open Indo-Pacific means countries can make their own choices. There are relationships of equal and reciprocal treatment. But what we see now with the Chinese Communist Party, I think, is particularly disturbing. The COVID-19 pandemic, the way it was handled, such that it couldn't be contained locally based on the deception of the party. And then what we've seen is really adding insult to injury, with this wolf warrior diplomacy aimed at Europe and the United States. We've seen in the midst of the pandemic, massive cyber attacks against our medical research facilities and our pharmaceutical companies. And then of course, you have the national security law, the repression of human freedom in Hong Kong. A big contrast to free and open Indo-Pacific is the effort by the People's Liberation Army and the Chinese Communist Party to really affect what would be the largest land grab, so to speak, in history in the South China Sea if they were to succeed. A lot of threats toward Taiwan, and what Japan has seen is increasing aggression in the Senkakus as well. I mean, not even to mention what we've seen the party do in the midst of the pandemic, extending and tightening its exclusive grip on power internally. This campaign of, I think it's fair to call it, cultural genocide in Xinjiang, for example. So, of course, the free and open Indo-Pacific is a great vision, but China's flip to that is one belt, one road, and an effort to create these servile relationships with countries in the region. What's your assessment? How do you see the threat from an increasingly aggressive Chinese Communist Party under Xi Jinping, and how well do you think we're doing in countering this aggressive approach that we've seen from China?
Well, when we invited China to WTO, we were hoping that China may have a different political system. China could be a good player or a good partner in this global forum. But what happened is, for the last 30 years, Chinese defense spending has increased 44-fold. And last 10 years, their defense spending more than doubled. So now their defense spending is 4 times as much as what Japan pays on defense. As a result of it, China now has more than 1,000 fourth generation and fifth generation fighter jet, whereas our air self-defense force has just about 300. Chinese Navy has more than double the number of our maritime self-defense force submarine. So as economy grows, any country try to grow their military power. That's what's been happening in the history, But what do we see in the midst of COVID-19? I was defense minister in the first half of this year, and we experienced so many Chinese military aircraft approaching our airspace. So self-defense force fighter jet had to scramble against the Chinese airplane 150 times in the first 90 days, meaning almost twice a day, our self-defense force aircraft scrambled against the Chinese airplanes. And that was rare even during the height of Cold War. So what we are experiencing is a pressure from China, not only to the airspace, their government ship with guns coming into our territorial water near Senkaku Island, and often they stay there quite long time. And as you said, we experience their land grab in South China Sea. And what's happening in Hong Kong, Well, they have international promise to keep the Hong Kong system for quite some time, but they are trying to destroy the system in Hong Kong. So we have to question what their intentions are. And we really need to work closely with like-minded country to check their military expansion. I was talking about quality infrastructure before. China has been lending money to countries like Sri Lanka or Maldives or Laos or other country, but oftentimes they overlend money. And countries like Sri Lanka was not able to pay back the loan. So they were trying to develop the port of Hambantota, but they realized they are not able to pay back the loan. So China came in, took the control of that very port for next 99 years. Same thing is happening to a couple of islands in Maldives or the electricity grid in Laos. So we need to be very careful about China's money lending policy. So in order for us to check those Chinese behavior, we have to argue based on the international rules. And what I'm really regretting is that in United States, former President Obama proposed the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was not just a trade deals. It was a new forum to create the rules for the Indo-Pacific on not just the trade, investment, environment, labor, and all those rule-making body. And we were ready to join TPP. Yes, there was a political cost to pay domestically, but Prime Minister Abe decided it is very important. So LDP lost some seats in the parliament because of the TPP, but we decided to join. And as we completed the negotiation, United States left TPP. We created the CPTPP after US has left the system, but we are hoping that one day United States will come back to TPP so that we can make it a rule-making body for entire Indo-Pacific. Even the United Kingdom is willing to join TPP, and other countries in Asia and the region are trying to join TPP. So if US could come back to it, I think we can make that as a very good future rule-making body for Indo-Pacific. And we are very much looking forward to that.
Great. Kono-san, one of the reasons why Americans are so skeptical about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, and multilateral trade deals overall is because of after China was welcomed into the World Trade Organization, even before that with most favored nation, a lot of portions of America's economy were left behind. Were left behind based on these transitions in the global economy. So I think you're right that it is more important than ever, that we work together, because if we're together, it's very hard for the Chinese Communist Party to continue its campaign of economic aggression and unfair trade and economic practices. And I'm concerned in particular about some areas such as data standards and communications infrastructure. This is really China's effort to control data flows in the world associated with fifth generation technology. You mentioned trading debt for equity and taking over a port in Sri Lanka, which has been replicated in other places. For example, Chinese companies actually run both sides of the Panama Canal these days. So I think the ambition is very large for the Chinese Communist Party. It's really, I think, to dominate the global logistics system and global communications in such a way that we're at a disadvantage, which I think highlights, as you're alluding to, that we have to work together, the United States, Japan, the European Union, because if we're all together, India and others join, then it's very hard for the party to play us against each other and to continue these forms of economic aggression. Could you share maybe some of your priorities now that now you have an economic portfolio again? And where do you think the biggest areas for the United States and Japan and others to work together on the economic front?
Yep. As we fight against the COVID-19, well, China was trying to promote the way they rule the people. The authoritarian regime may be quick to react, so maybe it is better system than the democracy. I don't agree with it. Democracy may take some time at the beginning, but it's more flexible. And if people support government through democracy, we can move much more efficient and effective. And we see that we have relied too much on China for essential product like mask, PE, and other things. So we really need to think about our global supply chain. We need to really consider if the supply chain is resilient, or in case of COVID-19, or in case of other emergency or contingency, is our supply chain resilient enough? And if not, I think we need to modify WTO rules so we can bring some production back to our own country. Also, technology is going to be very important. It used to be like internet or GPS. The military technology spill over to the private sector, but now the technology that developed and used in the private sector could be applied to the military technology. There are many of them. So how we can work together with other like-minded democratic countries to promote technology so that we can be stronger both ways, I think it's very important. And also, data is important. I think in 21st century, a lot of people are saying that data is new petroleum for the economy. Yes, it's true. You have more data, you know more about it. So it is important US, Japan, Australia, and India with huge population could get together and invite other like-minded country, Europe, and we can share data, we can analyze them together, we can come up with a new method to analyze the data, and our economy will be built on that. So it is quite important that we need to work together. No country could walk alone in 21st century.
Well, I'm so glad you're in the position you're in to help lead this now. I think you're absolutely right. This is such a critical competition. And there were elements of the TPP that still exist on data and in these areas that could be applied more broadly. So I think much of the work is already done. It's done also in large measure, I think, in the bilateral trade agreement that we concluded last year, which I thought was a great accomplishment for both countries. So I really appreciate your vision there. I think there are these new forms of competition, and the stakes are very high, and it's an unprecedented competition because during the Cold War, our economies were never intertwined the way that they are now, and so I think that we should celebrate when the right person's in the right job at the right time. I think that's the case with you for sure, to provide that vision at this critical time. Minister, I'd love to talk with you too about another problem that you're very close to as well, and that's one of the, I think, the greatest threats not only to Northeast Asia but also to the world, and that's a North Korean regime in possession of the most destructive weapons on earth. Of course, North Korea it's a gulag state that it's tortured not only its own people, but kidnapped, abducted Japanese citizens. It's imprisoned and murdered Americans as well. We've witnessed what appears just in this parade recently, this new missile and the parade commemorating the 75th anniversary of the North Korean Workers' Party, what is in reality, of course, the world's only hereditary communist dictatorship. and I'm sure you saw Kim Jong-un shedding tears during his speech, and what seems to be an attempt to try to deflect blame for this regime that is spending all this money, on missiles and the most destructive weapons on earth, and building palaces and erecting monuments to himself across the country, while his people remain largely destitute, right? So it's a very dangerous place. Obviously, I think it's hard to overstate the threat with this kind of regime, having nuclear weapons and delivery capabilities, and so I thought I'd just ask you to assess really, how do you think we're doing? We work so well together in the development of this strategy of maximum pressure under the thesis that we could convince Kim Jong-un that he's safer without those weapons than he is with them. How do you see the threat now? How do you see our response? What more do we need to do?
Yes, North Korea has achieved more and more missile technologies. Now their missiles have longer range. It could reach Guam, Hawaii, or maybe possibly the mainland United States. And it has achieved some nuclear capability. And we don't know really what's really happening in North Korea. So it's quite dangerous to the global system. Well, we are supposed to be putting economic sanction on North Korea so that they won't be able to put more money into their missile and the nuclear programs. But I think we are failing that. It's, one, they are getting petroleum and some petroleum-related product through ship-to-ship transfer. And they are selling their coal and other natural resources also through ship-to-ship transfer. US, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Canada, other countries are trying to prevent this ship-to-ship transfer, but their ships, the North Korean ships, are moving closer to Chinese territorial water. So we won't be able to stop that. So we need to work on China so that China will cooperate with us on putting pressure on North Korea. Right now, I think there's a loophole, and North Korea must be getting some support from China. So we have failed to get China on board with us. I think we definitely need to talk to China. That I think even for China, the increased capability of North Korea is not good. If they have a nuclear weapons, it could be a threat to China as well. So we definitely need to create some kind of momentum to work with China and put the stop on North Korea. And we also not quite sure the situation of COVID-19 in North Korea. And they have been hit by a couple of typhoons this year. I think their harvest last year was quite bad. And we have reason to suspect the harvest this year may not be good again. So they're going to be very pressed for their economy. We need to show Kim Jong-un that if they choose the right, if he makes the right decision, they have natural resource, they have fairly big number of population, they can achieve economic development, but he's not making the right decisions so far.
And it's always been a dynamic period of time when there's a change in leadership in our countries. I think Kim Jong-un has repeated, or the Kim family has repeated this pattern of a big provocation, and then we rush to them to talk with them. They try to extort money, big payoffs, release of sanctions just for the privilege of talking to them. And then we enter into these long drawn out negotiations that result in a weak agreement that they then break. And I think it's going to be very important for us to stay together, to maintain our resolve, to keep the sanctions in place until there is this irreversible momentum toward denuclearization. We worked pretty hard, as I remember our time together, and with Yachi-san, to keep the United States and South Korea and Japan together as a family. So whenever there was a provocation, we wanted China as well as North Korea to see that provocation as driving us even closer together. I know that it's been a difficult time in Japan-South Korean relationship, in that relationship, and I just wondered if you might comment on that. Is what work are you and your colleagues and Suga-san doing on the South Korea relationship, and how do you see the prospects? I hope, for one, I would love to see them get better.
Well, South Korea is our important partner, and we should improve our relationship. When I was foreign minister, at the beginning of my term, Foreign Minister Kono of South Korea and I worked together, set up a task force so that we can make this bilateral relationship to the next level. And we've been doing very good until this Supreme Court decision in South Korea came up, which was against the 1965 treaty between Japan and the Republic of Korea. That is a legal foundation of our bilateral relationship. So I really hope that this ROK government try not to violate 1965 treaty. I think if you talk to the younger generation in Japan and South Korea, I think they love culture of the other country. I mean, K-pop and the movies are very popular in Japan, and we have so many young Korean people coming to Japan to taste the Japanese restaurant, go to Hokkaido, go to Okinawa, play golf in Japan. So if you talk to the younger generation, I mean, they really wanted to create a better relationship between two countries. So this Supreme Court decision is, just in the way. And I really hope this South Korean government could do something so that it will not violate the 1965 treaty.
I hope so too, and it does. I think that it does have a big impact on how China sees the region and sees actually the problem associated with North Korea. I think we have a North Korea strategy. We being the United States, Japan, and South Korea. China seems to have a U.S. strategy, which means they want to divide all of us, right? And as the first step of maybe driving the United States away, so it can isolate Japan. It's our greatest rival in the region. So I think it's so important for us to stay together. And thanks for your leadership on that issue. And I'll be hoping that we hit bottom a while ago in the South Korean Japan relationship. There are so many other issues to talk with you about, but I wondered if for the last question, I just might ask you an open-ended one. And in the United States, there is these days this deep skepticism of internationalism, and an international approach to problems. But of course, we've learned from COVID-19, if you don't cope with problems abroad, you have to deal with them at a very high price once they reach your shores. And other issues fall into this category as well. Issues of energy security and the environment and climate change. And so I wondered if you might just take a moment to explain to our viewers, explain to American citizens how important the U.S.-Japan relationship is to really all of our security, and what is your vision for how it should evolve, and and what more can we can do together. I mean, you've had the portfolio as foreign minister. You've had it during a period of significant change in the self-defense forces as Minister of Defense as well. So I just like to give you the platform here to talk to our viewers about our alliance and what your vision is for it.
Well, I'm really worried about what happens after COVID-19. I think the international society is sort of being divided into democracy and authoritarian regime. Democracy, free society, and the authoritarian regime was sort of Orwellian society. The government is watching over you. And we need to maintain this liberal international order that made the global economy so prosperous after the World War II. In order to keep the liberal international order after COVID-19, I think US, Japan, Europe, Canada, Australia, and the like-minded country need to get together. And we need to pull countries that trying to become democracy, but are not yet. Some Asian countries like Myanmar, with Aung San Suu Kyi, the Myanmar started to walk towards democracy. It will take some time, but I think Myanmar people wanted to achieve the goal in the future. There are a lot of countries like that, and we need to help them become democracy. But they have economic relationship with China, and China always try to talk to them. Well, authoritarian regime can make quick decision. It may be better to develop the society, develop the economy, and we have to work together to give developing countries some help. So one day they will become democracy. They will become capitalist country. They are going to be the free society. So it's important for United States to maintain relationship with Indo-Pacific countries. And Japan could be a very good partner for US in this region. And I think we have become an important partner in this region. So together with other like-minded countries, we will work together to make the global democracy and market economy and the free society. I think that's the goal we share. And no country can walk alone. We have to share technology. We have to share data. We have to share the value. We have to share the vision. So US-Japan alliance is probably the most important partnership, as former Senator Mike Mansfield once said.
Well, Kono-san, I agree with you. Thank you for that just strong description and strong case for the U.S.-Japan relationship. And Mr. Kono, on behalf of the Hoover Institution, thank you for helping us learn more about a battleground important to building a future of peace and prosperity for generations to come. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Battlegrounds is a production of the Hoover Institution, where we advance ideas that define a free society. For more information about our work, to hear more of our podcasts, or view our video content, please visit hoover.org.